I want to see somebody try and imitate Michael Jackson in the moonwalk.
They want to do away with cows. They want to do away with gas. They want to do away with Cal gas.
You can see where the Green New Deal ends up. It ends up in Venezuela.
What we see in Venezuela is the worst humanitarian crisis in Latin America's recent history.
Walls end lives.
The jury found that Guzman led the Sinaloa cartel, one of the largest and most dangerous drug cartels in the world.
Mr. McCabe was hell-bent on stopping Donald Trump.
My fear response turned into more of a fight response.
How do you not believe that? It's the truth.
No one got everything they wanted in this bill, but sign it and don't cause a shutdown.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation.
We don't tell our adversaries what we're going to do.
I'm going to be signing a national emergency.
It does raise the question who the Bolshevik is here.
Why you, Mr. Wells?
Well, I've got a boy's regular haircut to start with.
This is the only time in our entire lives in public service that we were in the same room with John Dingell and got the last word.
All we need is love and chocolate, right?
1 week in Washington. Tune in to Fox News Sunday this weekend. Rush Limbaugh joins Chris Wallace. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and still unafraid. The story hosted by Martha MacCallum starts right now. Hey, Martha.
Hey there, Brett. We have a Fox News alert to begin the story this evening. We've got brand new details that are now coming in, chilling, from this devastating scene in Illinois where a gunman opened fire on employees at a manufacturing plant in the city of Aurora. Officials have just delivered a slew of new details on this moments ago. They are confirming that 5 people lost their lives today in that manufacturing plant. Also, chilling details about the gunman, who we now know is dead after a shootout with the police.
Several teams of officers went inside to locate and engage the offender. The building is 29,000 square feet, and when they located the offender, they engaged in gunfire with him, ultimately killing him.
5 of those police officers are wounded. Mike Tobin joins us now live at the scene with the very latest tonight. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Martha. And we learned that the loss of life, the bloodshed here in Aurora, Illinois, was much greater than we earlier knew. We just heard from the police chief and other authorities that 5 civilians were killed in this mass shooting. We know that 5 police officers were shot, 2 immediately upon arriving the scene and entering the Henry Pratt building there, the manufacturing facility. They had an exchange of gunfire with this shooter, and 2 subsequent to that, and ultimately a 5th police officer was shot. There is discussion about a 6th injury, and what we've just heard from the police chief is that 6th injury was a knee injury to the police officer. Chief Karen Zeman drew attention to the sacrifice and the diligence of those first responders.
Thank you for your selfless act. Thank you for running towards gunfire and putting your lives in danger to protect those inside the business. My heart goes out to the victims and their families who simply went to work today like any other day.
A police source tells me the extent of the injuries, or the number of injuries among the civilians, still hasn't been tallied up. He points out that it's a 30,000 square foot facility, and you have to define injuries. Are you talking about gunshots? Are you talking about people who twisted their ankles running away? They're going to have an update later on in the evening, and we expect to get more details about the civilian injuries. We do know the identity of the gunman. Now he is identified as 45-year-old Gary Martin, who worked at the plant. The Sun-Times is reporting that he was recently laid off, and according to his mother, he was extremely stressed out. We know now that Gary Martin, 45 years old, was killed in an exchange of gunfire with police. Martha?
Mike, thank you very much. Mike Tobin, live on the scene tonight in Aurora, Illinois. Joining me now, Joe Cardinale, retired NYPD lieutenant and former NYPD commander. Sir, thank you very much for being here tonight. When you hear what Ms. Zeman described as the SWAT team essentially running into this enormous warehouse and gunfire coming at them from what must have seemed at that point like many directions.
It's just what the police do all the time. They're trained for this. They have special situations where they go in. The whole thing is to isolate and contain. And when you're running into this and you have civilians involved, you're trying to minimize any further injuries or loss of life. The fact that they contained them into an area, I'm sure they got them back to an area where they thought they could possibly either take him alive, or it ultimately ended with him getting killed. But they did an excellent job with this, and for the families of the victims, it's just a sad, sad day. But once again, law enforcement shines in these moments, and this is how they handle it under the greatest stress you can imagine.
Just watching this afternoon as all of this was unfolding live, just an enormous law enforcement presence that poured into that entire area. And, just watching them as they moved through these maneuvers, trying to get around that building, and that was an active shooting scene. They were on the scene in 4 minutes, I understand. Just an enormously quick and thorough response, correct?
Correct. This is what law enforcement deals with today. Every time something like this happens nationwide, and actually, across the world, they have forums and they sit down and they say, how could we address this? And another police department will say, how would we have handled this? And honestly, they handled this as anybody could expect, with the greatest results. But this is a sad thing that every time something like this happens, it actually becomes a learning experience for the next time. And I think this paid off because it minimized the extent of additional lives lost and people injured.
5 people lost their lives in that warehouse today. And as she said, they just went to work. They were just showing up at work on a normal day. And this, obviously, from the reports that we're getting, was a disgruntled former employee of this warehouse. When they entered the scene, what's the protocol? What goes through your training as you enter when it's so large and you really don't know which way to go?
Well, that's the whole thing. The cops run towards the shots. If there's shots being fired at that time, I don't know if he was still firing or he finished doing what he had to do, and they had to find him in the warehouse. Naturally, somebody will give them a brief rundown of what the warehouse looks like, which way he went, and the whole thing is, while they're containing that scene, they're getting everybody out, protecting everybody, but they're moving right to him. They're going right to the source of the danger, and like I said, it's to isolate and contain and minimize any further loss of life or any injuries. And it's a sad day when 5 people go to work and they lose their lives, and police officers get injured doing this, but their training tells them that that's the instinct. There's no hesitation here. They run right into danger. They run right into the line of fire to protect everybody else. And God bless them and everybody else across the nation that does this every day.
Absolutely.
Every day.
Great point. They ran towards the fire while everybody else was trying to get away, and no doubt saved lives there today as well. And we think of their families tonight, and we hope that their injuries are recoverable and that they will all do well. And our heart goes out again to the families who lost their loved ones tonight. Joe, thank you very much. Good to see you, Mr. Cardinal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Also breaking tonight, this bizarre story. Police in Chicago have arrested tonight 2 potential suspects in the case of Empire actor Jussie Smollett's reported MAGA country attack. That's what he said was yelled at him when he was attacked. The pair arrested are 2 brothers who are from Nigeria who reportedly have a connection with the actor's TV show. Howie Kurtz coming up next.
The police have gone through a lot of video, and they were able to capture an image of 2 people of interest. Have you seen that image, and do you believe that they could possibly be the attackers?
I do.
What is it about their size, or why do you feel that they could possibly be?
Because I was there.
And there is no doubt in your mind what motivated this attack?
I could only go off of their words. I mean, who says empire, this MAGA country, ties a noose around your neck and pours bleach on you? And this is just a friendly fight?
That is actor Jussie Smollett describing an alleged attack in great detail earlier this week. Now this incident, as you have heard over the course of the last couple of days, is facing some serious scrutiny about whether or not the whole thing may have been staged. Tonight, Chicago police confirming the arrest of 2 brothers who are potential suspects, and they have probable cause to believe that a crime was committed. But here's where things get interesting. These brothers, who are from Nigeria and who were on their way trying to leave Chicago O'Hare Airport when they were arrested, are also believed to have worked as extras on Smollett's TV show, Empire. In fact, several scripts for the show were also seized from their home, along with these items on this list of evidence. You see bleach, which he describes as being used in the attack against him, black face masks, and a red hat. Here now, Howie Kurtz, host of Media Buzz. Howie, good to see you tonight. Obviously, this has been, a curious case for a number of reasons from the beginning. When the police arrived at his apartment, his home, they said that he was sitting there with the rope still around his neck, that it wasn't tied in a noose. There were just a number of things that sort of didn't add up, that caused people to be cautious. How do you think this story has been covered?
Well, with restraint, and I think that's appropriate, because I, like a lot of people, thought there's a lot here that just doesn't smell right, but I didn't feel comfortable talking about it or writing about it because there's so much we didn't know. Now that we have the police arresting these suspects, but it's not clear, were they arrested because they were part of a conspiracy with Jussie Smollett, or were they arrested for assaulting Jussie Smollett? They haven't actually been charged yet, and there were unconfirmed reports that the police are now kind of knocking down yesterday, saying this was all an orchestrated hoax. It's hard to know what to believe.
Yeah, ABC7 in Chicago reported that it was a hoax, and that he was being written off the show. They say that there's no corroboration of that from the police in Chicago. Here's one more soundbite from the ABC interview. Let's watch.
It feels like if I had said it was a Muslim or a Mexican or someone black, I feel like the doubters would have supported me a lot more.
What do you make of that? And what did you think? I'm curious about the line of questioning from Robin Roberts. Did you think it was well done?
Well, I think she had to ask questions about the skepticism because there has been so much of it. At the same time, she had to allow for the possibility this guy was actually beaten up on a Chicago street at 2 o'clock in the morning. It is remarkable if this turns out not to be as advertised, that what he is saying is not true, or that it was some sort of political stunt or related to the show Empire, that he would go on Good Morning America, double and triple down, graphically describe the attack, and then express outrage that some people don't believe him. But at this point, I think I still have to reserve judgment, but clearly there's a number of things that are not adding up now. I suspect now that these two suspects are in custody, we'll learn a bit more about what really happened.
The facts should spill out in fairly short order, we expect, and we will follow them as they do. Want to get your thoughts on another big story this week, which was that the Senate Intelligence Committee reported that Richard Burr of North Carolina, who's the head of that, Mark Warner, the other senator who is the co-head of it on the Democratic side, but the Republican, Richard Burr, said that he found no collusion in their investigation. 2 years long, 200 interviews they did, extensive. It got according to the media research, it got not a single second of coverage in the evening newscasts on the Big Three.
Well, beyond the Big Three, the amount of coverage it got, if you blinked, you missed it. I mean, after all the avalanche of coverage about the Russia investigation, what's even more remarkable is that MSNBC actually broke the story that the Intel panel had found no collusion and got a rare tweet of praise from President Trump. Hell hath truly frozen over. But then NBC Nightly News, its own scoop, couldn't find airtime for it. I understand that a Republican-controlled committee is not the same as the criminal investigation of Bob Mueller, but still, you know and I know that had the panel found some evidence of collusion or some incriminating evidence, it would have been an explosion of coverage. And instead, not so much.
Yeah, 2,202 minutes of airtime for the Russia probe. So you would think that when there is a development as significant as that, and we all have reported this with the caveat that we still haven't heard from Robert Mueller, and that will be obviously the most significant piece of all of this when that comes out, and it'll be held with the other two investigations on the Hill to determine. But it is very surprising that it didn't get a scintilla of coverage over the course of that. Quick thought on the network blackout of investigation that found the Covington kids did nothing wrong. That too got short shrift.
Yeah, look, I think that was a colossal media failure, a reckless rush to judgment. A lot of journalists have apologized. By the time of this latest investigation, which confirmed that the kids didn't do some of these initial reports about chanting racial insults and things like that, I think it was newsworthy. I think it needed to be covered. I could see a network newscast, 22 minutes of airtime, maybe feeling that's now an old story. It's kind of been disproven already, but I'm not defending that because I do think when you make those kind of charges, and this dominated the news for days, as you know, Martha, it's kind of incumbent on you to say, hey, there was another investigation, here's what it found. Even if you give it a minute, that's an important update for people because this got so much coverage, not just on television, but on Twitter and all the other places where these kids were unfairly convicted for something they didn't do. They were not the instigators here.
And there's a lawsuit to cover now as well. Howie, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight. Brand new details released late this Friday night from former FBI Director Andrew McCabe's interview with 60 Minutes on his conversation with Rod Rosenstein and the possibility that they would put their heads together and count how many people might want to move the president out of office with them. Former federal prosecutor Andy McCarthy joins me next.
I just see our new Attorney General is sitting in the front row. Please stand up, Bill. Such an easy job he's got. He's got the easiest job in government. Thank you, and congratulations. That was a great vote yesterday.
The president welcoming his newest cabinet member, Attorney General William Barr. He is the new sheriff in town at the Department of Justice. At this point, we can only wonder what his reaction was to the stunning comments made by Andrew McCabe, who says that as former acting FBI director, he and others, including the deputy, Rod Rosenstein, discussed ways that they could potentially remove the president from office. Today, a spokesperson for McCabe saying that his comments were, quote, taken out of context and misrepresented. But a newly released transcript of his interview with 60 Minutes reveals exactly what he did say. So you can look at it and you can decide for yourself. Discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply Rod raised the issue and discussed it with me in the context of thinking about how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort. He went on to say, counting votes or possible votes. Here now, Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor and Fox News contributor. Andy, good to have you with us tonight. You know, just looking at those words on paper, this is all part of a story that came out in the New York Times several months ago. But now hearing him speak these words and seeing them exactly as he says them, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it just confirms what appeared to be the case back when we first learned of this, Martha. You have two things, I think, that were going on. One is, under McCabe's supervision, the FBI for a number of months had been conducting an investigation where they didn't want to name Donald Trump in a way that they'd have to tell him that he was a subject of the investigation, but they structured it in the hope of gaining evidence about him and finding a crime. And I think that was the week they thought they might have one. I think they're wrong about that. When he fired Comey, they thought that that might get them over the hump on the obstruction part of the investigation.
But what do you think about them, you know, just
being
there talking about the potential of removing the president from the Department of Justice and getting together with, you know, counting heads and figuring out how many cabinet members might also be on our side that, you know, to try to make this happen?
Right. Well, but think, Martha, they're already trying to make a felony case on him, right? So it's not that big of a leap to think that they'd want to get him out. That's why they wanted to make the case on him. I don't think they cared about whether he went to jail or not. They wanted this guy out of office. They didn't want him in office in the first place, but they, you know, if there was a way to get him out, that's what they were about.
So what about Bill Barr? I know you think very highly of him, and he will have a lot on his plate. The president was joking about how it's such an easy job to run the Department of Justice. But, you know, is this something that you expect him to revisit, this whole 2016 side of the equation that has not truly been investigated?
Well, I'm hoping that it is under investigation and that one of the first things he'll do is try to get his arms around what's been done up until now. Remember, we've been told not only that the Inspector General is looking at some of the decisions that were made by the investigators, but that John Huber, who is the U.S. attorney in Utah, was assigned also to look at some of this stuff. So I hope among the first things that Attorney General Barr does is get to the bottom of what's been done and figure out what has to be done going forward, because I think people like me who spent a long time in the Justice Department and who care about institutions like DOJ and the FBI, I think we understand that there has to be accountability here, and it's got to be looked at in a credible way. And if it turns out they had good reasons for what they did, we should know about that. But if they didn't, there needs to be accountability for that, too.
What are your thoughts on Rod Rosenstein? Because, you know, he has a very twisty path through this whole story and somehow basically managed to, you know, he was going to be fired about 5 times. You know, those were the leaks that were coming out. Managed to, you know, somehow hold on to his job, despite the fact that sometimes he seemed to want to, you know, at some point mentioned wearing a wire to pick up what the president was saying. And then at other times seemed to be, you know, getting along well with him.
Well, you know, I think the relationships had ebbs and flows. Clearly, in that 9 days in May, I think he was reeling because he wrote the memo that was used to justify firing Comey, and I think he expected to be widely praised for it because the way the memo is written, he talks about what bipartisan consensus there is that Director Comey had to go. Yeah. And then it became clear in very short order that he not only wasn't going to be praised, but that was going to be teed up as if it were an obstruction. And he suddenly needed to, I think, show to all the people who previously thought well of him that he was still on the team. So the way he did that was to speculate about the 25th Amendment, to talk about possibly gaining evidence against the president by recording him, and ultimately deciding to kick it to a special counsel.
I just have about 15 seconds, but your thoughts on the recommendation for a 19 to 24-year prison sentence in the East District of Virginia case against Paul Manafort?
Yeah, it's going to be very high in Washington, too, Martha. This is the fallout of Mueller tearing up Manafort's cooperation agreements. That means the sentencing guidelines kick in, and the counts he got convicted on, they have pretty high guidelines.
Andy McCarthy, thank you very much. Good to see you, sir.
Thanks, Martha.
Coming up next, the Democratic donor who spoke to Vice President Biden and broke the news that he is 90% sure that he is in the race for 2020. He'll tell us what he said. Like a messy and complex growing web of candidates on both sides, really, for 2020. But let's start here. Joe Biden looks like he will get in. My next guest has been speaking with him and says Biden is, quote, incredibly excited to enter the race. He feels he would be the best candidate, and he's ready to go for it. Former economic advisor to President Obama and Fox News contributor Robert Wolf joins me now. You had a very good track record on recognizing the star power of President Obama when he was a candidate.
He was
you
at
believe
2%.
that
Hillary was 65, but those are such numbers I'll always remember.
So you see that same kind of youthful enthusiasm in Joe Biden this time around?
You know, this is going to be something we've never seen before. We've never had this type of diverse slate. We've never had kind of really a candidate field that probably no one's over 20%. And so we just don't know right now who is that candidate that can get through a primary and then beat President
But it definitely
Trump.
feels like everybody's waiting for him to decide. He's a former vice president. What do you think about what happened last time around? Was he pushed aside for Hillary Clinton, or was it all because of his personal tragedy?
Martha, I met with him in September of 2015 when he was deciding. And I know there's been articles about him agonizing this time around. No, he agonized that time around. And I think at that point, you know, his mind was telling him go in, his heart was telling him no, and he couldn't get there. This time around, I think his heart and his mind is ready to go. In my opinion,
but does he have resentment about last time in terms of being nudged aside for Hillary? You know, does he feel like, well, I would have won?
Listen, I've been with him many times where he feels he would have won, and I think, you know, he can second guess himself, but he's now moving forward. And I think the best way for him to move forward is for him to decide to enter.
So the president, you know, says he calls him 1% Joe. He has run twice before. Of course, that was before he was the vice president of the United States for 8 years. The president says, bring it on. He's full of gaffes. He says he's not that smart, not a smart guy.
Well, he may not be a stable genius, but, you know, we only have one in the White House at a time. Listen, we can't predict what's going to happen. There's no question that during the midterm, Joe Biden, the vice president, was the best surrogate for the Democratic Party. And that was a real blue wave. I know that a lot of your viewers don't want to admit that, but we've won over 40 congressional seats. We won seven governorships.
Big pickups in the House.
We won over 100 state legislators, and we've gotten 4 out of the 5 blue wall governorships. So he was the #1 surrogate. So I think it bodes well for them. For me, is I haven't decided, you know, if I'm going to support the vice president. There's a lot of great candidates out there, and we have to really take a hard look at who we think is going to be the best to defeat the president.
You know and like Kamala Harris a lot.
Yep.
And you also talk about Beto O'Rourke, who's 46 years old, has that youthful charisma on his side. And you say that, Democrats have succeeded only in electing candidates 53 years old or younger. That youth is what wins on the Democratic side.
Well, to date, since 1960, between JFK and Clinton and Carter and Obama, we like hope and change. We like young. We like aspirational. I do think this time around, because President Trump's in the White House, there is absolutely going to be a debate, is experience important? And I think Vice President Biden's going to say, hey, experience matters. Look what's happening today. We just don't know. I mean,
what's your dream Dem ticket before I let you go?
Well,
you don't have to say president or vice president, but two people that you'd like to see run maybe together.
Listen, I don't want to go there yet.
Come on.
A lot of people are saying that, Kamala and Biden would be interesting, or someone like, Kamala and Beto, or, there's going to be a bunch of outsiders coming in. And
no Elizabeth Warren? She done?
I don't think she's done, because we could see where in the first 4 primaries, different people win. And she's certainly been at the forefront on income inequality. My issue is I'm more center-left. I think we need to have a pro-growth Democrat to beat the president, because he's been strong in the economy, and you can't ignore that.
Well, Howard Schultz says he might get out if somebody like Biden goes in.
Howard Schultz should get out before Biden goes in, either way.
Thank you very much. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Good to have you here. All right, coming up next, this 18-year-old is another young man who pledged to fraternity and never came home from college again. He was reportedly made to drink a gallon of alcohol, and that was just the beginning. He was dead less than an hour later. That is next. Indiana State University have been arrested on charges ranging from misdemeanor hazing to felony second-degree battery. The men allegedly beat pledges with a metal pipe, attempted to burn them with cigarettes, and ordered pledges to lie naked on broken glass. This news comes on the heels of a separate incident at Ohio University, where extreme hazing is being blamed for the death of this 18-year-old freshman who was forced to consume drugs and drink a gallon of alcohol in under an hour. Jonathan Hunt has this story from our West Coast newsroom tonight.
Good evening, Martha. The arrests of 9 members of the Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity follow claims that they were involved in hazing that included forcing pledges to lay on broken glass, urinating on them, and forcing them to stand in containers full of ice and water. The charges against the 9 range from criminal hazing to felony battery. 7 of those arrested are still students at LSU. The university issued a statement saying, quote, "This type of behavior is unacceptable and at complete odds with what we expect from our students. It does not belong at LSU. This is a sad day for the university, but one that illustrates the cultural shift occurring at LSU." While the DKE fraternity, now suspended at LSU, said, quote, "In our ongoing educational programming regarding hazing prevention, we emphasize to our undergraduates that individuals should and will be held accountable for their actions. We will continue our efforts to eliminate hazing wherever and whenever it occurs." DKE was founded at Yale in 1844 and says its membership has included 5 U.S. presidents, including both George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush. Its website boasts that it, quote, "is known for producing outstanding gentlemen, leaders, and jolly good fellows." Louisiana enacted an anti-hazing law after the death of 18-year-old Maxwell Groover at LSU. He died after being forced to down multiple drinks laced with 190 proof alcohol. Forced alcohol use was also allegedly a part of the hazing suffered by Ohio University teenager Colin Wyant, who died last November after also allegedly suffering physical, mental, and verbal abuse and sleep deprivation. According to a toxicology report, the 18-year-old Sigma Pi fraternity member's cause of death was asphyxiation due to nitrous oxide ingestion, and a wrongful death lawsuit filed by his family states that over months of hazing, fraternity members forced drugs, including cocaine, Adderall, and Xanax on him, while also beating him and forcing him to drink a gallon of alcohol in just 1 hour. A lawyer for the family says the fraternity attempted to cover up Wyant's death, and pledges were told to make up a story. In a statement, Ohio University said their hearts go out to Collins' family and friends, and that the Sigma Pi fraternity remains on a cease and desist order pending an investigation. Martha?
Unbelievable. Jonathan Hutt, thank you. Joining me now exclusively, the attorney for Colin Wyant's family, Rex Elliott. Mr. Elliott, thank you very much for being with us tonight. So who is your lawsuit against? Are you planning to also sue the university, the Ohio University?
Well, yeah, we don't know just yet. We don't have enough information regarding what the university knew and what it should have known. But our lawsuit right now is directed at the organizations directly responsible for this, which are the local chapter of the Sigma Pi fraternity and the national chapter of the Sigma Pi fraternity, which has had problems on college campuses across the country.
You know, when you look at the numbers, I think 40 people have died in hazing incidents in just the past 10 years on college campuses, and the deaths go on before that. When you listen to what is being done to these young men, and I can't help but think about the rightful work that's being done on campuses to prevent sexual assault and Me Too. And everywhere you go on college campuses today, there are posters everywhere with phone numbers to call. Where are the phone numbers to call and the posters and the movement to stop this kind of senseless death of young men?
Exactly. The reality is that these anti-hazing statutes, some of the publicity in the past, the reality is that fraternities are a thing of the past. You put 50, 60, 70, 18 to 22-year-old boys in a house congregating together, and then you don't watch them. You simply send them over there and you tell them to enjoy their own social status. It's a recipe for disaster, and one life lost is too much.
Absolutely. And this young man, according to what I read earlier about this case, he said to his friends as he was heading out from where they were, I'm going to get hazed. He got a call, time to show up at this off-campus house, which is a separate building where they were doing this stuff. Is that right?
He was on call 24/7. Colin Wyant had just gotten home from a great weekend with his family. He had connected with some of his friends, and he got the call around midnight to connect with the active fraternity members. He was on call. He had, in his world, he had no choice, and he immediately told a friend that, here we go again, I'm about to get hazed. Colin Wyant was seen, observed at 2 o'clock in the morning, perfectly sober, not drunk, not intoxicated. And 50 minutes later, as he ventured into that fraternity house down at 45 Mill Street, he was dead.
It's unbelievable. What do they say? What does the fraternity say? And what do these so-called brothers say about why they do this to these young men and why they did this to this young man, potentially, allegedly, causing his death?
Well, it's a great question, and the reality is there's no redeeming value for the kinds of things that they put Colin through. That night, I will tell you that at 2:50 a.m. in the morning, there was a 911 call placed by one of the active members who told the 911 operator that, hey, Colin seems to be a little unresponsive. Looks like he had way too much to drink that night, which is just a bold-faced lie. And then on top of it all, within hours, instead of being concerned about Colin and his family, the fraternity congregated. They pulled themselves all together. They initiated all the pledges that night. It was not supposed to occur for a couple months. They initiated them that night, had a big meeting, talked about what happened that night in order to get their story straight. So the reality is, this fraternity in particular was not really concerned about life and death. They were concerned about their own survival.
Well, keep us posted on this case. We followed Tim Piazza's case very closely here, and we will follow this case closely as well. And our heart goes out to his family. They must be absolutely heartbroken, of course, at the loss of this young man. Devastated. Unbelievable.
Devastated.
Thank you. This should not happen. Rex Elliott, thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha. It's been a privilege.
Coming up next.
I'm not going to box myself in, but should I become it, I'll be looking to women first.
Ladies' Night takes on Cory Booker's female VP hunt next.
To be noted.
2020 Democratic hopeful Senator Cory Booker just said this about picking a vice president.
I think that you will rarely see a Democratic ticket anymore without gender diversity, race diversity. I think it's something that we should have. So I'm not going to box myself in, but should I become it, I'll be looking to women first.
Okay. Booker also noted that there should already be a woman president and that he worked hard to make that happen. And with that, our Ladies Night panel, Lisa Booth, Jessica Tarlov, and Rochelle Ritchie. Lisa, he says, of course he would pick a woman if that would be the first place he would go.
Well, I view it as pandering. And also imagine if you're that woman that he picks and he's simply just picking you because he wants, gender diversity on the ticket. I don't like this as a woman. I would rather just be viewed and get a job simply because I'm the best fit for the job. And if you really truly want equality, that's just a level playing field. That's why I'm against things like equal pay. I don't want the government coming in and mandating and dictating the terms with my employer. I want to get increased pay because I deserve it. I've worked hard. I'm the better fit for the job.
Yeah.
So I don't.
I would love it if he said, "I'm going to pick the best person for the job,"
exactly.
Rochelle. Well,